Hey, y'all, M19. Have you heard about them? We're talking about M19. Stay tuned. So there's more.
Oh, yeah. But
wait, my gosh.
There's more.
There's always more. Because, we were told on January 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th and 10th and ad nauseum by mainstream media that we had a storming on the Capitol that we haven't seen since 1813?
1814.
1814. That's what mainstream media was leading you back to. 1814, the last time there was any kind of storming of the Capitol. Now, we saw the storming at the Capitol. There were perspective videos from positions that I don't really know how they got that perspective shot. But there were. Like following the guard back up the stairs. I'm not exactly sure how they managed to capture that, but they did. Is that conspiracy theory? It's not conspiracy theory. It's just, hey.
How do you interpret what you see on film?
I'd like to know how they captured that. But we did see these stormtroopers walking between the velvet ropes.
Yeah.
There was one or two that jumped the rope, ran up, jumped back in line.
No, they said 1814 was the last such incident.
Oh my gosh, and this is the one thing that I can't understand about our media. Why have we not heard about M19CO?
Well, first of all, what is M19CO? M19CO stands for May 19th Communist Organization.
Yep.
M19.
Now, why would they say M19? Because it shared birthday with civil rights icon Malcolm X and Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh?
Now, see, M19 was an offshoot of the Weather Underground. Some of you have probably heard that before.
Bill Ayers?
Yeah. And the Black Liberation Army. Now we're going back to the 70s here. Not
absolutely.
Not 1814. We're talking
late 60s.
The late 60s.
Early 70s.
Well, actually all the way through the 70s and into the 80s. But the M19 Communist Organization, like I said, was an offshoot of Weather Underground and Black Liberation Army. And it was different than the typical male-led terrorist groups.
That's for sure. It was very different.
These women, who had been members of the Weather Underground and BLA, decided to continue the armed struggle.
So, we'll just say for a second that the Weather Underground went really underground. And they were responsible for bombings around the country. It's been proven, and they really went underground.
Well, now, if you want to know the whole story, there's a book. It's titled "Tonight We Bombed the Capitol."
Yep.
Now, there's a little teaser right there that was post 1814 and pre January 6th.
Absolutely.
Now, William Rosenau wrote the book. He's a national security expert and historian. And he described M19 as basically a group of essentially middle-class, well-educated white people who made a journey from anti-war and civil rights protest to terrorism.
And they did. And they did.
Oh, yeah. They were formed in 1978.
Yep.
And after their formation, their tactics quickly escalated from picketing and making posters and protests to robbing armored trucks, prison breaks, and bombings.
Bombings!
Several bombings. They helped spring the explosive expert William Morales, who was with FALN, the Puerto Rican nationalist group.
Yep, nationalist group.
They also sprung Black Liberation Army organizer Assata Shakur.
Yep.
And both Shakur and Morales still remain on the FBI's most wanted list.
for terrorism. For terrorism. So, 2 people they sprung to help out with their organization are deemed terrorists and still at large.
Now,
thought to be in Cuba.
And there's a couple more that we'll tell you more about later, but in 1988, the government had what they called the resistance conspiracy case.
Ooh.
Remember that? #resistance. The indictment described the goal of M19 as being, quote, to influence change and protest policies and practices of the United States government concerning various international and domestic matters through the use of violent and illegal means.
Violent and illegal.
Now, 7 people were charged in that case.
Yep.
Which included, let's see here, they've got quite a list of charges.
They do.
That included the bombing of the United States Capitol building. The bombing of the United States Capitol building.
Wait a second. The bombing of the Capitol building, was that in 1814?
No, that was in 1983.
1983. Now, on the 6th of January, I didn't hear any news media talking about that. On the 7th of January, I thought, well, all right, we didn't hear anything on the 6th, so certainly mainstream media was going to bring out the 83 bombing of the Capitol building. No, not on the 7th either, and I hadn't heard it on the 8th or the 9th or the 10th from mainstream media. I did capture a glimpse of it from somewhere outside of the mainstream media, so I had to do some research on this. I had to look into this, because if we had a bomb planted outside the Senate chamber doors and it exploded, wouldn't that have been a whole lot worse than a bunch of people walking through the velvet ropes?
No, did about $1 million worth of damage in 1983. And that wasn't their only target. They also hit 3 military installations.
What?
In the Washington, D.C. area, and 4 sites in New York City. The military sites bombed were the National War College at Fort McNair, the Washington Navy Yard Computer Center, and also the Washington Navy Yard Officers Club.
There you go.
In New York City, they hit the Staten Island Federal Building, the Israeli Aircraft Industries Building, the South African Consulate, and the offices of the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association. 6 of those charged in the case have since been released from prison, and 1 was never captured.
How? How do you say they were released from prison?
Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about these people.
Yeah, let's do that.
These Mary Jean Buck.
Marilyn Jean
Buck.
Yep.
She was arrested in 1985, and prior to joining M19, she was the only white member of the Black Liberation Army. Susan Rosenberg was one of M19's leaders, very influential early on. Starting in high school, Rosenberg spent time with members of the Black Panthers and Young Lords, and her politics remained very leftist.
Yes.
Linda Sue Evans hailed from the Midwest. A self-described corn-fed girl, Linda Sue's politics took a radical turn at Michigan State University during the Vietnam War. Many M19 members' stories echo Linda's college activism.
Absolutely.
At schools like Cornell and Berkeley and Radcliffe and Hampshire College. Shaped their far-left worldviews. This is in the 70s. We're coming out of the late 60s, the summer of love and the rise of Marxist, cultural Marxism, basically.
Absolutely.
And for some of the M19, their status as out lesbians put them at odds with the heteronormative patriarchal society.
Oh my gosh.
Where have we heard that before?
Yeah, absolutely. We're hearing it frequently.
Now, Buck, the Marilyn Jean Buck, the first one, she received an 80-year sentence.
80 years. That's actually pretty good considering all the things that she did.
Now, she did actually serve 33 years of that term in federal prison, and she was released in 2010, less than a month before she passed away from cancer at the age of 62.
So she was released to be free so she could die.
Now, Rosenberg and Evans,
that's a totally different ball game.
I'll let Pat tackle that one.
Their sentences I think not. I'm just spitballing, but I think that Rosenberg received like 58 or 68 years for her part in the bombing of the Capitol. And Evans was right there in the same amount of time. Okay? So we would assume 83 to current, they would still be in prison. Mm-hmm. All right? I don't care what kind of good behavior. You're a terrorist. You should have been sent to Gitmo. That's where they send terrorists, right? To Gitmo. Domestic or foreign, that's where they should go, is Gitmo. They didn't go to Gitmo. In fact, they were in very minimum security federal prisons.
Well, to be honest, they didn't have Gitmo back then.
All right, well, it doesn't matter. They should have had Gitmo. But listen, they didn't serve their full sentences. In fact, on his last day in office in 2001, they both had their sentences commuted to time served. Commuted to time served. Well, if you do the math, in 2001 on his last day would have had to been Slick Willie Clinton. I mean, it would have. And it was. In fact, Bill Clinton, who commuted both of their sentences on his last day in office to time served. Two domestic terrorists. Now, I don't care if you had a re-education in prison. You did something, you got time, and you didn't serve it all because Bill Clinton commuted that sentence. Now, I know that presidents commute sentences. We heard all about all of Trump's commutations going on. Oh my gosh, it was a rich white guy who got commuted. It was this, or it was General Flynn who got commuted. And these were convicted terrorists. In fact, not just convicted, these are admitted terrorists.
Now, you say they may have had a change of heart in prison. But where are they now?
Well, as of 2020, because inquiring minds want to know, Susan Rosenberg serves as the vice chair of the board of directors of 1,000 Currents. What is this 1,000 Currents, John?
It is a nonprofit foundation that sponsors the fundraising and does administrative work for the Black Lives Matter Global Network.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And Linda Sue Evans, the other one who got her sentence commuted, she travels around the United States advocating for lesbian and female inmate rights.
Hey, so that's great. I don't have a problem with her advocating for that. That's absolutely 100%, I think, a worthy cause.
Now, advocating and bombing are two different things.
But maybe she had a change of heart. Now, if she's just advocating, hey, I advocate for gay rights. That's fine with me. I don't have a problem with gay people. I really don't. And I can explain that to you in another video. What I do have a problem with is Susan Rosenberg was commuted to time served in 2001. She went on to become a professor at several New York colleges. So what was she teaching her students while she was a professor, adjunct professor, getting paid?
Now, I seem to recall another ex-Weather Underground member who is a professor.
Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers, who, if I remember correctly, Mr. Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, I'll give him that dignity because all in all, he probably had some good ideas, but very twisted in his methodology. I don't think he was a great president. I don't think he's a great man, but he did share office space with Bill Ayers prior to him becoming a junior senator.
And actually, if I'm not mistaken, didn't he announce his presidential candidacy from Bill Ayers' house?
I think he did. I think he did. Now, we're talking about the guy who was the head of the Weather Underground.
No, we're also talking about, we're going back to the 60s and 70s here.
Absolutely.
And just like a lot of the women in M19 were radicalized at college.
Yep.
A lot of the Weather Underground, Black Liberation Army, and a whole host of other groups radicalized at college.
Yeah.
And
what does Susan Rosenberg and Bill Ayers do?
Susan Rosenberg and Bill Ayers are now professors at college.
Well, actually, Bill Ayers travels the world with, what's her first name? Dorn. I want to say Bernadette, but
Bernadette Dorn, yeah.
It is Bernadette. Okay, see, so my mind was Bernadette Dorn and Bill Ayers travel the world talking about their time in the Weather Underground. They talk about socialism. They bolster socialism.
Well, they bolster
socialism,
Marxist communism as socialism.
Stop that. They bolster socialism. Doesn't it sound pretty when they say the word socialism? That's progressive, John. Communism is a harsh word. It starts with a C, so it's communism. Can't have that. Fascism. Oh, that sounds bad. That sounds very Hitler-esque or Stalin-esque or...
No, Stalin was communist.
Lenin-esque.
That was communist. You're thinking Mussolini.
That's fascism.
Yeah. Nazism and fascism.
Wait a second. Hitler was a Nazi. Mussolini was a fascist. But it all really boiled down to the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a philosophy of control.
And it's a philosophy of nice words that sound good that in practice becomes very authoritarian, totalitarian, and destructive.
This just pisses me right off that on the 6th, throughout the next several weeks, all we heard about was insurrectionists, or militia members,
or the president inciting insurrection.
Trumpist cult members stormed our Capitol for probably 4 hours-ish. They did very little damage except kicking in doors and breaking windows
to gain entry.
And maybe they posed with certain things or items, and you know, I don't know what all went on there because I wasn't there, and I only will typically believe what I've actually witnessed in person because video can be
manipulated.
Very much so, and words can certainly be construed
and manipulated
as they were, because nowhere on mainstream media, when they were talking about this uprising, this insurrection, this rebellion, this horrible siege on the Capitol, did anybody mention 1983 and a bombing by a deemed terrorist organization where 6-7 people were imprisoned for their part in that crime.
And it wasn't just the bombing on the Capitol. This was a 20-month siege between 83 and 84 that resulted in, 7-8 different bombings?
Where 2 of them are still on the FBI's most wanted list as terrorists. No mention. Crickets on a bombing.
And we won't even get into the 68 riots after the MLK assassination, where DC literally burned and remained in shambles until the 90s.
But you know,
so take all of this and try to put it in context with what happened on January 6th.
You see, because that's what I'm doing. I'm doing my research to figure out what's going on here, because they're calling me a daggum tinfoil Stetson wearing guy because I think there's conspiracies going on, because I think people are lying to us. They're saying things like, oh, these people, they're so defined in good and evil. You're damn right. I'm defined on good and evil. I'm not trying to tell you what's evil for you or what's good for you. What I'm saying is there's a baseline level of good and evil. We all should know that, because natural rights are based upon that. I don't try and force you to do something against your will, and you don't do something against me for my will. We have free will and free association as it was intended. We have life and liberty and pursuits of our happiness.
You know, on that note, we should probably look to some wisdom from the past.
We can, and we will. And there is so much more that our founders left their wisdom, their words. And yes, you can go and find them. You can dig them out of their letters because that's where most of these quotes come from. And although fact checkers who seem to actually fall off the face of the earth after the inauguration, and we don't see a whole lot of fact checking any longer, as they continue to censor, so truthfully, those that were putting all those false quotes up and all that other crap and misattributions to the sayer.
And missing context.
Missing context. We don't see much of that anymore because they've really lessened the impact of pages like Cold Dead Hands by making it almost a rudderless ship, along with so many other pages, Instagram accounts, YouTube accounts, all of those things. So we're going to leave you with one last quote from our founder that kind of delves into good and evil. And you need to decide for yourself. Like I said, it's not something to dwell on, but you know the difference. Most people were raised in the differences. So John, give us one of these awesome tidbits from the grave.
Well, I'll go to James Monroe.
Okay.
Of the liberty of conscience in matters of religious faith, of speech, and of the press, of trial by jury, of the vicinage in civil and criminal cases, of the benefit of the writ of habeas corpus, of the right to keep and bear arms, if these rights are well defined and secured against encroachment, it is impossible that government should ever degenerate into tyranny. And that's what all of these groups have in common, whether it's M19, whether underground, or the Trump cult. They have a problem with the government being tyrannical.
They've got to make you believe that Orange Man was bad. They have to make you believe that those that promoted Orange Man, that held him in high regard, that voted for him to be president, they have to make you believe that we're uneducable and that there needs to be re-education camps or reprogramming done. They say they need to take kids from our families so they don't follow down the same rabbit hole that we conspiracy theorists have fallen, because we're so fixated on good and evil.
But what James Monroe is saying here is, if government simply follows the Constitution as written and intended, the liberties of the people would be so well protected, there would be no problem with the government.
Right.
There would be no government oppression, no police brutality, no police, whatever your complaint is about the government stems from the fact that the government is not acting constitutionally as intended.
You have to decide, was our country built upon a Federalist Constitutional Republic, or was it built upon progressive socialist ideals? I don't think that there's a whole lot of discussion that needs to happen to understand that it was a Federalist Constitutional Republic that they fought and died for in 1776 when we declared our independence and when we won the war and when we defined the documents that would go on to be the underpinning of one of the greatest governments ever known to man as a Federalist Constitutional Republic. That's what it is. But they've swayed your minds and made you believe that we were something other than what was defined for us. Hey, we can see that men are flawed. We can see that mistakes were made. But the more you try and bury the mistakes of our past under a rug, the higher that mountain of crap underneath it becomes, and the harder it is to go up and over every time.
You keep tripping over the stuff that you're hiding under the rug.
Absolutely. So that was our take on what was missing when our mainstream media enlightened us upon the siege at the Capitol.
Now, the siege, the coup, the insurrection, the cult,
There's so many words they used. And the reality is they didn't tell us not one little bit about 1983 and that bombing that took place inside our capital that amounted to $1 million worth of damages. Did it hurt or harm anyone? No. Did this little insurrection or siege harm anyone? One person died, a guard,
and
from pre-existing health conditions.
And a woman got shot.
And a
by
woman
Capitol
was
Police.
shot by Capitol Police. So yes, there were people harmed in that. And I think that was a shame.
But the question is, was the harm intentional on January 6th? Like a bomb is very much intentional. Now, people are going to say, but there were pipe bombs here, here, and here.
Were there?
Did they go off?
Were there really? I mean, did you see them? Were you there to defuse them?
That's what we're being told.
Are we conspiracy theorists? Maybe. But as I always say, behind every conspiracy theory is a shred of truth. And it's not conspiracy theory once we figure out that truth was true. It's just like MK Ultra.
Yeah. Once the truth is exposed, it's no longer a theory.
In the 60s, MK Ultra was a conspiracy theory. Brainwashing, harming military and homeless people, killing them, doing all the Tuskegee Airmen. All of those experiments were part of MK Ultra. They were part of a CIA initiative to reprogram and brainwash innocent people.
We actually did a whole video on that.
We did, and I wrote an entire conspiracy book about that. In fact, let's get a shameless plug for my conspiracy book that's based upon MK Ultra as it goes into more modern times and involves technology, which we are now seeing. So, with that being said, are all conspiracy theories untrue? Unless they're proven, they are. But one day, they might be proven, and then you are going to have somebody say, I told you so. And listen, like we end them all, if you really, really, really want peace,
prepare for war.
Later, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you put us up for Rumbles. That's what gets us noticed. Later.